And we are live. Welcome to the Political Orphans. My name is Nico Lagan, and I am the in-house conservative. To my left, Rob Ambrose, our token lefty, and together we speak about what's trending in the news. Our goal is very simple. We want to show you that it's possible for leftists and a rightist to get along. And if we don't get along, you know what? We're capable of having a conversation like normal human beings. Because remember, common sense has no political affiliations. How you doing, brother?
How's it going, brother? How's your weekend?
Good, man. Busy. You know, there's
Yeah.
big plans coming up, but
Big
good.
plans.
Very
Yeah,
good.
we're doing a
Big,
little teaser here, but there is big things
yeah,
coming for the show, and we'll talk about that later. But we have a special guest today. Nico, you want to introduce her?
absolutely. And I will try not to mess it up because I have an intro for her. So today on the show, Rob and I are joined by world-renowned climatologist Judith Curry. To give a bit of background, she is a former chair of Georgia Tech School of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences, president of Climate Forecast Application Network, and author of Climate Uncertainties and Risk. Our certainty. Bah! Gotta love the French accent. How you doing? How you doing, Judy?
Fine. Thanks for inviting me back.
The pleasure is all mine. I thought that we had a great conversation last time we spoke on my podcast. I love that people left a bunch of comments and they were calling you out on a bunch of stuff. And most of them are just like Rob, they're leftists. So Rob still believes in the narrative of climate change. So I thought it was the perfect opportunity to have you on to let him ask you questions and see how it plays out. So thank you for being here, but I know that's what you want. So yeah.
Yeah. So Nico, as Nico said, I am left leaning, and so generally speaking, align with the scientific consensus, or at least the way the media presents it. However, like I think a growing number of liberals, I'm becoming increasingly skeptical about media narratives, and so I'm certainly not militant about this. I just want to get it right. One thing me and you, Judith, were talking about before the show is this issue seems to have gotten very politicized, and I don't think it should be. I really don't think this should be a left or right issue. I think the stakes are too high, really, frankly. I think most people we just want to get it right. And so that is, I guess, the approach I'm going to kind of come from here. And, I'm actually, like I said to you, I'm actually really excited about this interview. If I wasn't doing it, I would be watching it for sure. So then, I guess we'll get started.
Hold on.
Oh,
Rob,
okay. So
never skip over engaging with your audience, brother.
Yes, of course.
We need to ask you guys a question. The question is running at the bottom, but I will ask you the question. Do you think that we need to have an open debate on climate change, or is the science settled? That's the question I have
Don't
for
you
you
love
guys.
that saying? The science is settled.
Yep. And I also want to remind the people watching that we want to hear from you guys. So make sure to ask us questions. If you have questions for Judith, you have comments for her, let us know. I'm looking at the comments on all platforms, so don't be shy. Interact with her, interact with us, and we will ask her your questions. On that note, now it's time for you to go, Rob.
Thank you, sir.
1, 2, 3, go.
Thank you. So Nico's the more experienced podcaster than me, so sometimes he corrects me like that. But this show is all about audience engagement and audience participation. So, a lot of times we will stop and just drop questions in there. So, guys, if you're watching, you have a question for Judith, jump in and we'll ask that. So Judith, I was doing a lot of research for this interview. I want to kind of get a sense of sort of your views and whatnot. And it seems to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that your views could, broadly speaking, be summed up as you do believe the planet is warming, you do believe that human-generated CO2 causes warming, and that the plausible worst-case scenario is potentially catastrophic. First, would you agree that that is an accurate summation of your views? Okay, and please correct it. And I guess the second part of the question is, could you please explain where your views diverge from the scientific community's consensus on this issue?
Okay. First, let me, this poses a left versus right. Let me clarify my position. Politically, okay. I'm an independent with libertarian leanings. I regard myself as a liberal in the classical sense, like maybe from 200 years ago, okay. Not what is called liberal today. So, I'm not some right-wing person. With regards to the science, here's what we know. We know that the temperature has been warming for the past 150 years. We know that humans emit carbon dioxide from burning fossil fuels and other activities. And we also know that carbon dioxide has an infrared emission spectrum that acts to warm the planet. However, there's disagreement on the most and substantial uncertainty on the most consequential issues. How much of the warming has been caused, by fossil fuel burning? Is warming dangerous? And will rapidly reducing our use of fossil fuels be overall a good thing for humanity? I mean, these are the things that we disagree on. And most importantly, there's deep uncertainty in terms of how the climate of the 21st century will actually play out. Yes, we might expect, some warming to continue from burning of fossil fuels, but there might be explosive volcanic eruptions, massive shifts in ocean circulation patterns, under ice volcanic eruptions, all sorts of things that could happen. They've happened before, in the past several thousand years, recent geologic history, they can happen again. So we fundamentally don't know. There's deep uncertainty in terms of how the climate of the 21st century will play out, independent of emissions.
Those geological events you're talking about, the volcanic eruptions, they correct me if I'm wrong. They will spew sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere, and they would cause cooling. Is that correct? Is that how that would work?
Well, that's how it usually works. But we had the most recent big volcanic eruption was Hunga Tonga a few years ago. And this was actually underwater at just the right depth to erupt and spew an enormous amount of water vapor into the stratosphere, which has contributed substantially to the warming and the record temperatures we've seen in the last few years. The other volcanic action occurs like under the ice sheets. I mean, the West Antarctic ice sheet has something like 80 volcanoes, one of them of which is active. If these become, active, this could be a big shift in what's going on with the ice sheets and with sea level rise. So Mother Nature is a wild and crazy place. We've had relatively benign climate for the last several hundred years. And so we could see the early part of the 1800s, there were 3 hugely explosive volcanic eruptions that substantially changed the climate for a decade. One of them, Tambora, was, nicknamed the year without a summer because the skies were so black. So, there's lots of other things going on in the climate besides, our emissions of CO2 and other greenhouse gases.
I'm just going to follow up with Rob's question and ask you, why is it that we don't seem to hear what you just mentioned from the climate change? I'll call it narrative because I don't know which other word to use, but why does the people that are more on the left side of the political spectrum that are always talking about climate change, why do they not address what you're saying? Because it always seems that CO2 is the problem and that's what we need to get rid of. So why are we not having that debate, or at least that information provided by the left side of the story?
Well, the climate narrative is fundamentally a political narrative. Okay, we've had the the policy cart has been leading the scientific horse for more than 40 years now. I mean, this is, became regarded as a useful issue for the globalist agenda. And the problem was framed only to focus on dangerous human-caused climate change. So people looked only at fossil fuel emissions and we're only looking for the dangers. And that's, put this in play. And for the academic researchers who want, a successful career, they're advised to focus on those issues. And to the extent that they become activists, they're rewarded,
So it's a matter of incentives, is basically what it boils down to. It's a matter of
incentive. It's become, incentives. So it's a lot of them are the people who are speaking out, like I said, that are not supporting the consensus tend to be people who are older and financially independent and don't have to worry about, their career and their funding and all of this kind of thing. And it's not a good state of affairs.
Before I wanted to show you a video that I found because it kind of shows the complete opposite. Like we hear a lot about the climate change activists. Then this video is the complete opposite, like just completely going against the narrative. And I wanted to show you this video as somebody that sits more in the middle to see what you think about it. But before I do that, I just want to acknowledge there's a couple of people that commented. So Prairie, good evening, good morning, good evening. Where are you located? Good morning, at least where I'm from. Good morning to you, I guess, where you're from. As always, Jason is good morning to all. He said that Ronald Reagan once said that biggest cause of pollution is trees.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at CO2 as the primary pollution, then yeah, I mean, he's right.
Yeah, it's just Jason's one of the guys that's on our show every now and then.
Friend of the show.
He always has a smart ass comment to pass. So here is the smartest comment from Jason. I'm gonna play the video. That's the one I want to get your opinion, Judy, on this, but I'm also curious to see what Rob thinks about it because he hasn't seen the video. So I'll play it right now.
This environmental question depends on, I think, a very flawed fundamental presupposition. It depends on the idea that carbon dioxide is pollution. And I would argue, after interviewing hundreds of scientists, including many who've worked for the UN IPCC, many of the leading scientists in the world, that the notion that CO2 is pollution is absolutely preposterous. We exhale about 2 pounds of it every single day. The proportion of greenhouse gases made up of human CO2 emissions is a fraction of 1%. The idea that that is going to destroy the planet or change the temperature of the earth is, frankly, in my opinion, totally ludicrous. But from a totalitarian perspective, if you can convince people that CO2 is pollution, there's no human activity that doesn't result in CO2 emissions, including living, including dying, turning on a light switch. Every single aspect of your life, then, if we submit to the idea that CO2 is pollution, then comes under the regulatory control of the people who claim to be saving us from pollution. So when they do these environmental studies and they say, well, your CO2 footprint will be smaller if you eat bugs or you do this, that, or the other, you drive an electric car, that doesn't show anything about whether that's going to benefit the environment or not. In fact, CO2 has actually been very beneficial for the environment. In interviewing Trump's climate advisor, Dr. William Happer, a physics professor at Princeton University, he said the Earth is starving for more CO2. And since we've had a little bit of an increase in atmospheric CO2 over the last 100 years or so, plants have gotten much greener, agricultural yields have improved. So I think we need to also talk about the fundamental presupposition here. Is CO2 really pollution? If it's not, then all these alleged environmental benefits are completely fictional.
So this is the narrative a lot of conspiracy theorists like me hear all the time. And I thought this video was brilliant because it talks about everything that a lot of guys on the right think. What do you, when you hear him, because he's a journalist, he says that he said in the video that he's spoken to hundreds of scientists. Do you agree, disagree, or is the truth somewhere in the middle?
Okay, well, CO2 isn't a pollutant. It was a political decision to label it a pollutant so it could come under certain regulatory control. Okay, so it was purely a political decision. So his main point that CO2 is not a pollutant is correct. Okay, and he also said that there are benefits to CO2 in the atmosphere. I mean, the Earth is greening. And this is unambiguous evidence from satellite observations since 1980 that the planet is getting greener. This is caused by more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and secondarily to warmer temperatures and more rainfall. So those points are absolutely right. I mean, some of the inferences that he makes farther on, the whole story is a lot more complicated, but he makes these very valid points, in my opinion.
So that is factual, that the Earth is greening, because I mean, I've never heard that added to the narrative personally.
Oh, you have to hide to find it.
Yeah, it's funny.
Dig.
Sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
Dig is hidden.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking of when you were talking just a few minutes ago about incentives and funding. It reminded me of a quote. Actually, I had to look it up to see who said it, but it's from Upton Sinclair. It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. And it seems to me that dynamic is somewhat in play here. And that's actually a good segue to my next question, which is actually about funding. So, as I'm sure you're aware, it's a common critique made by climate skeptics that climate scientists are motivated by funding. Where it comes from, implying that scientists are paid essentially to come to a specific result, which that goes against, I think, my understanding of how science is supposed to be done, and I suspect most people's. So my question to you is do you believe that scientists are being funded to push a narrative? And if so, what parties are funding and benefiting from this narrative?
Okay, now in the health field, I mean, the money from big pharma is so ubiquitous, that, it's hard to be objective. You don't see that same thing in the climate field. They claim that this is all funded by big oil. Well, there's been next to no funding for all this from big oil for several decades. The whole science, they regard this as a political issue and an economic issue. They're not wasting their time, giving money to scientists. So it's not that kind of money. I mean, the big source of money is really from the U.S., from the government, in our case, the U.S. government. And that's tied to a political agenda. The motivation is more careerism, in terms of getting publications, external recognition, in terms of big awards and, excuse me, prestigious speaking engagements, seats at the table, at the policy table, and things like that. So that's sort of the motivations for careerism. Yes, they want funding. I think we're going to see the spigot turned off in the U.S. for what I would say global warming research. I mean, I'm hoping it's not all of climate research, because we need good, solid climate dynamics research to further our understanding of what's going on. But I think we're going to see, some significant funding cuts, and it'll be interesting to see how many people quickly redirect their research, into other things as they become more lucrative. In terms of, I think a lot of scientists, recognize the uncertainties and whatever, but they would like to work on, some of these really tough problems. But, it takes time, it takes money, and that's not there. That's not where their, career rewards are, lined up. So it's sort of a complex situation. I mean, some of them are genuinely green evangelists, and are just, so politically aligned with like the neo-Malthusian, agenda that people are bad and the environment's fragile and all this kind of thing. So some people are really tied up in that ideology, and it's hard to change their mind on that one. But the rank and file are just trying to do science and to have a decent career. I think they can be, steered pretty quickly by different incentives.
So you don't believe it's like a deep rot within the entire field that just needs to be done away with? You think it's reformable, in your opinion, based on just changing the incentives?
It's reformable based on incentives. But the sad thing is, in our universities, the most prestigious departments in the country. I was at a meeting of the American Meteorological Society about a month ago today, 2 months ago, and I was talking to people and say, we have all these PhD students. We have to pass them with their comprehensive exams. Otherwise, the DEI police will come after us and we're in trouble. So we end up with these students, and all they want to do is analyze the outputs of climate models to try to find some dire impact of warming. Okay. And then they go off to, I guess, have some sort of a career with that basis. But, we've lost a whole generation of climate dynamicists, people who really are seeking to understand what's going on, in favor of all these people who are playing what I call climate model taxonomy, just looking at the output from climate models. And this is just not a useful thing to be happening. So I'm worried, that we've, lost of people, the people who used to have come into this field with a hardcore physics background, wanting to dig deep into the fluid mechanics and all this kind of stuff. I don't know that we're getting those into our field anymore. They just view this whole thing as a big political hot potato. So we're drawing the wrong sort of people into our field. So I predict, without any inside information, that over the next 4 years, we're going to see a big realignment in the funding on this topic. Overall, a lot less money and funding redirected to what I would call trying to understand what's going on, rather than, just playing around with climate models. So, we'll see how this plays out, and we'll see if we can, attract people back into our field with this fundamental hardcore physics and chemistry expertise. So, I don't know. It's just been this whole thing has been a very bad, negative situation for the advancement of climate science, in my opinion.
How do you think that could happen? Like, because obviously you're talking about the Trump administration, but how would the Trump administration go about kind of removing that political affiliation when it comes to climatology? Because I agree with you that it's everywhere, right? You look, and it's not just climatology. In the education system, everything seems to be pushed by more of a woke left ideology than just let the science let scientists do what science is supposed to do. So what do you think the Trump administration can do in order to kind of put that back in the middle?
Okay, he's already told U.S. government employees not to participate in the UN IPCC climate assessment process. Okay, he's already told them that. Okay, he's, I think, pulling money from certain segments of NOAA that are related to this, and they're going through and pulling money, that gets dished out in grants and cooperative institutes and things like that. And they've pulled back a lot of money that was going to the non-governmental organizations, the NGOs that have been promoting the narrative. They're pulling money from a lot of the media outlets that were, we've seen in the news a huge number of very expensive subscriptions going to all these media outlets that are promoting the narrative from the Democratic Party. That's being pulled. So we're already seeing some of this being pulled. I don't know exactly how it's playing out, but people are starting to be terminated from NOAA. I don't know any statistics or anything, just some people who are on Twitter says, oops, I got my email, I'm gone. So it's happening. I don't know exactly how it's going to play out, but it is starting to happen already.
I know for a fact that you're not part of the education system. Like last time we spoke, you said you're in the private sector now. You kind of left the unfortunately, you did leave your teaching career. is there something that would bring you back to it? Like if you see that change that you're speaking about right now come to play, would you go back to teaching again? Because I feel that we need more teachers like you that are ready to take a stance and just say, hey, whoa, can we stop this politics and just teach?
Okay. The universities are so vested into all this other stuff. It's going to take decades for this to unwind in the universities, and by then I'll be dead or not interested in whatever. I'm no spring chicken anymore. Yeah, no, it's a really sad state of affairs. And the reason when I left, I mean, apart from, politics, I said, well, the students that I advise, it's going to hurt their career to say that they worked for me. It's not going to help them. There's some people trying to cancel me and destroy me. So, it's, even though they would learn a lot from me, it would not help their career. And that was one of the key, reasons I said, okay, I'm out of here. At some point I have to have some, I don't want to beat my head against the wall. There's very little that you can do. Around 2013, I was getting ready to leave Georgia Tech. There were people poisoning me at Georgia Tech. I said, well, I want to move out west. Let me try for some of these other positions. I was always, getting all sorts of inquiries from headhunters. Oh, there's this position you'd be good for. So I applied for some big administrative positions in California schools, actually, and even got some interviews. And the headhunters said I was a great candidate, but at the end of the day, no one will hire me, because if you Google Judith Curry, all you see is Judith Curry, climate denier, Judith Curry, serial climate disinformer. I said, okay, my academic career is dead. And then I started, I can't beat my head against the wall and fight that right now. I mean, I'm just going to jump ship, go into the private sector and, continue trying to make a difference, both trying to help my clients better understand and manage their weather and climate related risks, but also, speaking out. I'm active on Twitter. I have a blog, and I like to talk on podcasts. So I thank you for the invitation, where I can, get a different perspective out there and try to open up the dialogue on all this.
On that topic, Judith, I'm actually curious, and feel free to skip over this if it hits a little too close to home and you would prefer not to talk about it. But would you say, did you feel you were pushed out of academia, or were you blacklisted, sort of forced out, or was it a decision that you made?
It was okay. I was completely okay. I'm tenured, okay, but Georgia Tech was acting to completely marginalize me. I know they didn't want me there, but small office, no teaching assignments, no committee assignments.
They were trying to force you to quit, maybe.
Yeah. And so I milked that for what it was worth and got a sabbatical and an extra year off teaching. And I milked it a little bit. I could have hung around for another 10 years sucking up my salary, but that's not who I am. So, I just, I left, and totally happy that I did leave. I took a financial hit. I mean, that was a big salary that I threw away, but, I'm doing fine financially, and I'm really happy with where I'm at right now.
Some things are more important.
One of the things that we spoke about when you were on my podcast is about the climate change narrative that assumes that automatically oil and gas are evil. That and that's their main premise for pushing greener solutions, but yet we fail to recognize that nuclear and geothermal energy are often not only considered cleaner for the environment than turbine energy, but a lot more efficient at producing the power that we need. Do you agree that we should stop worrying a bit about the premise that they're pushing and really base our energy technology based on the environment where that technology is needed?
Okay, chapter 14 in my book, Climate Uncertainty and Risk, really goes through the whole energy argument. Look, there's lots of reasons to transition away from fossil fuels over the course of the 21st century. And probably the least significant is CO2 emissions, in my opinion. So, I mean, over the course of the 21st century, I think we would have naturally seen a transition away from oil and gas, and certainly coal, and not just because they're dirty, it's the geopolitics and, and they're going to be increasingly expensive to extract. And petroleum's valuable. I think if you look ahead to 2100, we'll still be using petroleum with all those products, but we probably won't be burning it for fuel. I mean, that's what I would expect. Okay, but the thing about the global warming narrative is that we have to stop now, okay, right away, even though it's like the source, like 82%, the source of 82% of our power comes from fossil fuels, and we need to stop right away. And because of the urgency, the only thing that we can do is wind and solar, because they're so easy and so quick. And while we're at it, let's get rid of nuclear power, because the green people hate nuclear even worse than they hate fossil fuels. Go figure. And so people were, as part of the global warming, we're tearing down, decommissioning their nuclear power plants, which is totally insane. Okay, the point is this. I think there's a role for rooftop solar and increasingly these small micro turbines that you can put on your roof, and it gives people some control over their own power and some security, personal security, energy security. But in terms of these big wind farms and solar farms, there are very few places on Earth where the population density is low enough where you can just do this. I mean, it's going to require a huge amount of land use. I mean, in the Western US, yes, we have that land, but then you have to have these huge transmission lines that, okay, people don't want, not in my backyard. So there's a big backlash of people who don't want this stuff, near their property. And there's no way that you can run an industrial economy on wind and solar. And people are starting to understand this. So there are much better solutions. I mean, the Generation 4 nuclear power plants are extremely exciting. New technologies, safer, don't require water. You can reuse the fuel. You can ramp them up and down. It's really exciting technology. And, the Chinese have shown us that you can, build these things in 6 years if you're not mired in a lot of regulatory red tape. Okay, and the geothermal stuff is extremely exciting. That's going to take, a little bit more time, to develop and commercially. But I think these are, very good solutions. And if we're not investing all our money in trying to deploy wind and solar, we have more money and intellectual energy to spend on, R&D, in the energy space. So I'm all in favor of a 21st century energy transition, but wind and solar are not it, apart from niche deployments on rooftops or whatever. That's my take on it.
Yeah, that's interesting. You would think, even if you were a hardcore believer in the worst predictions of climate change, you'd think you'd be pushing the hardest for those alternate sources, right? Nuclear and geothermal. And it sort of, in my opinion, sort of undermines the argument. Like, do you really care about CO2 emissions? Because those are excellent ways to drop it.
Okay, here's the issue. The worst case scenarios for emissions are off the table. Everybody was freaking out about 4 or 5 degrees centigrade or 10 degrees Fahrenheit of warming. These were based on these extreme emission scenarios that give you all this, and completely unrealistic, like increasing our use of coal by 600% globally. I mean, obviously not happening. Even the UN climate negotiators, the Conference of the Parties, dropped these extreme emission scenarios in 2021. Nevertheless, the IPCC and the climate scientists are still cranking out papers and analyses based on these extreme emission scenarios, because if you don't use these extreme emission scenarios, you don't see much of an impact that you can discern beyond natural climate variability. Okay, so the narrative, is of extreme warming is falling apart. So, right, the Conference of the Parties, based on the International Energy Agency emissions projections, expect 2.4 to 2.5 centigrade warming by 2100, and that's relative to post-industrial or the late 1800s. And we've already warmed by 1.3 degrees centigrade. So we're talking about another 1.2 degrees centigrade warming over the course of the 21st century. We've already seen that amount of warming in the last 100 years. And this is if you believe the results of climate models and if you ignore natural climate variability. So we're not talking about that much more warming. And even if we were successful at eliminating emissions by 2050, you wouldn't really notice this in terms of extreme weather or sea level rise or anything until maybe the 2200s, the 22nd century. And this is because for sea level rise, there's a lot of inertia in the climate system, in the oceans and the ice sheets. I mean, for the warming that we've seen in the last 100 years, we're still going to keep seeing an increase in sea level rise for at least another century, maybe 2 centuries. I mean, that's baked in. That is what it is. In terms of extreme weather events, there's no evidence that warming is worsening extreme weather events. And even if they are, the signal is so small, we would never notice it against natural weather and climate variability over the remainder of the 21st century. So getting rid, this whole idea that burning fossil fuels causes bad weather and we can get rid of bad weather by eliminating fossil fuel emissions is a complete fairy tale.
You have a question with that. You have a question on that, right, Rob?
Yeah. I actually, so actually that actually segues well into a question I was going to ask you. In 2005, you actually co-authored a paper which connected hurricane strength to global warming. I was just going to ask you about the progression of your career on your views. Have they changed based on the work that you've done, or is it? Do you still agree with the substance of that paper, and it is separate from your skepticism on other issues?
Okay, first off, the 2005 paper, which really brought me into the public debate on climate change. What we did for the first time, we put together a global data set on hurricane activity based on satellite data going back to 1970. And what we found that between 1970 and 2004, that the percentage of category 4 and 5 hurricanes had doubled over that period. I mean, that's an astonishing conclusion. We didn't say it's global warming. We didn't really say, anything. It was not a big global warming paper.
Okay.
It was actually, the paper was published. This is like a serendipity of the weirdest type. It was published 2 weeks after Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans. Okay, so there was huge, explosive, media attention and, the whole
there was
narrative
fertile ground for it
about global warming. Okay, and so there were a lot of criticisms of the paper. One of them is that the data, the satellite data in the 1970s and probably the 1980s is crap, in the Pacific and the Southern Oceans, and you really can't use it for this. And so I looked at that in detail, and I certainly agreed that the data in the 1970s and probably early 80s isn't good enough. The other issue that was raised is that there's a lot of multi-decadal natural climate variability, particularly in the Pacific and also the Atlantic, that is, really dominating the signal rather than, the trend of warming. And so these, were valid criticisms. And, researching into what's going on with hurricanes and became a big part of my research program, a big part of what I do in the private sector right now. So, I mean, what is the conclusion right now? that it's hard to see a signal against the natural climate variability. I mean, like in the Atlantic, we've been in an active period since 1995. This is tied to the warm phase of the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation. And at some point, we'll flip to the cold phase, and I would expect the activity to die down. So it's very difficult to find a signal, against all this natural variability. The one signal that to me seems convincing is that we're seeing more rainfall from the landfalling hurricanes in the Gulf. And to me, that seems like this could be tied to the warming. But other than that, I'm not seeing, unambiguous signals that there's anything here related to hurricanes. And even the IPCC, has low confidence in any conclusions about hurricane intensity or whatever. They predict hurricane intensity to worsen, over the 21st century, but they don't see evidence of this, in the recent historical record because there's so much natural weather and climate variability. So, this is about, I want to understand, I mean, right now my income, big part of my company's income is tied to the hurricane issue. And these are not political people. These are electric utilities. These are people putting offshore infrastructure in, and insurance companies. Okay, so I need to get it right and be realistic about the uncertainty so these people can make decisions. I'm not trying to give them anything that ties into a political agenda. Okay, if I give them bad information or overconfident information, I lose my clients, I lose my livelihood. Yep. My employees, could lose their jobs. So I have to be very, very careful about this being evidence-based, not being overconfident, and a full exploration and reporting of the uncertainties. So that's a mindset that I have, which is pretty different from the average academic who's getting fame and fortune by, raising the alarm. And, some of them even have publicity agents and charge 10 or 20K, to go give a lecture.
Academics have publicity agents.
Okay. Michael Mann is the poster boy for that kind of behavior. And he's the one who's pretty much destroyed my academic career, by calling me a climate denier and serial climate disinformer and all this kind of stuff. He has a big press following. Up until Michael Mann, people would call, politicians or journalists climate deniers. Okay. But Michael Mann said, oh, okay, I know how to deal with the Judith Curry problem. Let's call her a climate denier and throw her in the bin, with all the oil company shills and all the right-wing nut jobs and whatever. Then we solved the Judith Curry problem. And people said, yeah, great idea. And that's what ended up. And the single event that really destroyed my career at Georgia Tech was an op-ed that Michael Mann published in Huffington Post. I think it was 2013. And it was about basically going after climate deniers and me. And he called me serial climate disinformer Judith Curry. Well, Georgia Tech had this daily news feed where they would search for any mention of Georgia Tech and highlight it in their news feed. And this would send out to all the Georgia Tech students and employees and administrators and donors, and on it goes. And at the top of this was Judith Curry, serial climate disinformer. Okay, and it was that point that I this is bad for Georgia Tech. This is when I knew my academic career was over. So, you've got a number. I mean, percentage-wise, I don't know what it is, but a number of climate scientists with huge media footprints have been damaging the science, have been damaging careers for decades now. And,
wow.
It's terrible behavior. And they get recognized by professional societies,
And that goes into the incentives that you were talking about earlier. They get rewarded. And so other young scientists see the same thing. And they're human too, right? They all want the awards. They all want the recognition that comes
But there's
with
a
that.
certain ethic. Okay, if you're a scientist, there's a certain ethic that you're supposed to be seeking truth. And, science and reason have had science has had an elevated seat at the table because of its use of reason. Okay, and so when you start playing games like Michael Mann has been playing, in my opinion, science loses its privileged seat at the table, and it's all politics.
I agree.
One of the things that you had mentioned when we spoke is your views on scientists that become activists. That's exactly what we're talking about right now, where they're not pursuing the truth anymore, but really have a set agenda and will make sure that their data confirms their agenda. But what do you think? Let me ask you this. What do you think of activists scientists like Michael Mann? Like you had an expression for it last time. I can't remember what it was, but it was brilliant.
Oh, I don't remember it either. But okay, let me give you an example of an activist scientist who I find credible and I pay attention to. Okay, this is Jim Hansen. I don't know if you know who he is, but okay, he's the guy who gave congressional testimony in 1988 that really kicked off, the global warming thing. It's happening now, it's whatever. So he's an alarmist, but he does the hard work of looking at the key issues. I think he's relatively honest. He's done the hard work of trying to understand energy systems. He says you can't run, the wind and solar thing is a joke, and I agree. He's pro-nuclear, whatever. I mean, I listen to him. He's in his 80s, so he no longer has an administrative position or an academic position. But I think he's behaving in a responsible way. I disagree with him a lot of the time, but he doesn't trash his opponents. He doesn't call people like me a denier. So there are what I would say some honest activists. It's clear that they're activists, and he still digs into the science, and he's relatively honest. So you can do it, but most of them do it in a very ugly way. So if you're going to be an activist, you have to be very careful so you don't lose your credibility, your scientific credibility. Jim Hansen has retained his. I would say that a whole bunch of other people haven't retained theirs, in my opinion.
It has to be. I'm imagining that this is the guy that's on the screen right now because you're following him. So I would imagine that that's him. So for the people out there, for the people out there, you can find him on X at Dr. James E. Hansen, Hansen. So I didn't know about him, but I'm going to follow him right now because I want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. He's probably what I would call responsible and credible activist. I disagree with him a lot of the time. Not all of it, but sometimes I agree with him. But this is, I don't know, maybe he would come on and debate me. I have no idea. No, I have a high opinion. He's maintained his integrity and his credibility.
I'd love to have him on.
We should reach out.
We'll reach out to him. But before you go, Rob, let me just take a few of the comments that are here. So Jason was saying earlier that if we're going to stay with oil, I would love very much for the U.S. to stop exporting it and buying it back $2.5 on the dollar. Right now, California's oil production rivals the Saudis. And it's the same thing in Canada. Like we'd rather buy foreign oil than just drill, as Donald Trump would say. Jason as well. Oh, go ahead.
Well, this is politics and economics, and I don't claim any particular expertise on petroleum economics and that kind of politics. But yeah, I think that in North America, Canada, and U.S., we are very blessed to have a lot of natural resources, including oil, gas, and coal. So, we should play those cards. when needed for, our economy and our political agenda.
Absolutely. I'd be curious to see your opinion on this comment by Jason. Judy, he says, you don't lose your scientific credibility by lying. You lose it by telling the truth.
Okay, that and on the podcast I did last week, somebody said, so what is a climate denier? Why do people call you a climate denier?
Good question.
And I said, because I've rejected the job description that I should pledge allegiance to a political consensus. I reject that. Instead, I regard my job as a scientist to continually evaluate evidence, challenge conclusions and assumptions. I mean, I view that as my job description as a scientist, and for, basically to be skeptical. And that seems to be the definition of a denier. To do, it's sort of flipped everything on its head. People doing their jobs as a scientist, talking about uncertainty, all this kind of stuff, are labeled as deniers. So it's a complete flip of what this should be. So yeah.
Well, it's like the saying, the science is settled. We've been hearing that a lot in recent years, and that seems to fundamentally misunderstand what science is all about. I mean, how can it ever be settled?
It's never settled. I mean, there's some things that are obvious facts. The Earth orbits the sun, these kind of things. You don't talk about consensus about that. These are well-established facts. When you talk about consensus, it means there's disagreement and there's a political motivation for declaring a consensus on one side or the other. So, I mean, there's a big difference between a scientific consensus and a consensus of scientists. So it's a big difference. So what we have here is a consensus of a politically manufactured consensus of scientists.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like, regardless of your position on this issue, I think everyone should be deeply concerned about a culture where scientists who question a narrative are essentially blacklisted and told to hit the bricks, because that is essentially the nature of science, is to question narratives. Just to follow up with your discussion a minute ago about the two types of scientists, the Michael Mann and was it Jim Edwards?
Jim Hansen, yeah.
Jim Hansen. So in your opinion, I mean, just a rough guess, what would you say the percentage of Jim Hansens versus Michael Manns are out there in the field?
Oh, well, Michael Mann is the big star. I think people aspire,
I guess what I mean is how many are sort of like genuinely trying to get it right versus the just pure activists who have their agenda and they're gonna.
That's hard to know. That's really hard to know, because people, I'll call them the rank and file, but I don't say that in any kind of pejorative sense. It's the people who are not speaking out on either side. They just put their head down and try to do their work and, understand everything. They don't speak up, so it's hard to know what they think. But I think the vast majority are just people keeping their head down, and they don't want to get sucked into this debate. And some of them are more objective than others, but there's a full spectrum of people out there. But the one making the most noise is definitely, with all the media attention, is Michael Mann.
I have a last question for you regarding what you were saying about red tape earlier, because one of the issues that we see in both the US and Canada, there's a lot of red tape put in place by governments to stop the development of technology like nuclear and geothermal. But considering the type of president the US now has, what would you like him to see to kind of remove that red tape?
Yeah, the red tape. I think he's dropped the so-called NEPA requirement, where you have to do this, huge environmental impact assessment statement. Like Elon Musk gives the example, for his rocket launchers, he has to prove to them that when it comes back down to Earth, it's not going to kill a shark.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's crazy, and
it's a big ocean.
Yeah, I know. I think there's a lot of things that kill sharks. I think rockets are probably the least of them. So I think that's on Trump's agenda to get rid of the red tape. And I hope that happens. And, there's so much on their agenda and so much potential that could be done. I don't know what success he's going to have with all this, but I have to say I'm certainly in favor of it.
You're absolutely right. The article I'm showing on the screen right now is saying that 5 days ago, on February 26, 2025, Trump is moving to dismantle NEPA. So that's the NEPA. That's what you were talking about, right? So it seems that the National Environment Policy Act, and I think that's what I was saying. The interim rule on NEPA will be effective 45 days after publication, so about a month and a half from now. And there will also be a 30 days public comment period. So it seems that you're absolutely right. It seems that Trump is actually moving towards removing the NEPA requirements, which, if I understood you correctly, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that would kind of remove some of the red tape that the technology that we really should be developing will allow us to develop that technology finally, at least in the US.
And even just building things. I mean, it's impossible to build anything in the US. I mean, it's just crazy. I know the situation in Canada is more complex, from province to province and all this kind of thing. But the US, a lot of it is done at the federal level, and I think a lot can be cleaned up. I mean, let's see how this goes. I mean, this is just, this has been President Trump's administration has been seismic, and everything's moving.
We talk about that a lot on the show. It seems like he's been around for years. Like it or hate it, you can't deny he's getting stuff done.
Oh yeah.
6 weeks. 6 weeks in.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a good comment here from Jason. I don't know if you wanted to end on here, Nico, but he says on the discussion of questioning the science. He says there's also a misunderstanding of people supposedly questioning the science. That is incorrect. We're not questioning their intelligence, but their integrity. And I think that probably applies to the Michael Mann type of scientists.
It's a little bit of both. People who just have a deterministic view, like we understand them, they don't acknowledge uncertainty, that people that really don't understand the philosophy of science can be fooled and can be overcertain. So whether that's intelligence, I don't know, but they're more tuned into the politics of science than the philosophy of science. And I don't know whether I would call it an intelligence issue, or the education. You don't really. I mean, I took it on myself to educate myself about philosophy of science, taking some courses in university and then reading a lot. Certainly over the last 15 years, but most scientists don't get exposed to any of that. They're taught, the subject matter, and they're taught to do research and explore, but the bigger picture issues.
Is that not part of core training of scientists?
No. No. There's an ethics course, a lot of it's DEI, people understand what plagiarism, falsification, and fabrication is. They get training in that kind of ethics. But what I would call real philosophy of science doesn't really get covered in curricula. And if I had one thing to change about the scientific education, it would be to ground them, in these kinds of issues.
You have to be tethered to some sort of moral guide towards what you're doing, in whatever field you work in.
Yeah, and people confuse politics and morality quite a bit.
Oh, yeah, especially these days.
Yeah, and so all of this is very complex. There's no silver bullet solution. There's no single thing to blame. It's just that this decades-long politicization of the subject has spawned a lot of bad stuff and hasn't allowed the really good stuff like climate dynamics science and a lot of technology R&D, it hasn't allowed those things to flourish in the way that they should.
It seems that across the board, what's missing in academia is critical thinking. Seems like that's no longer taught or not encouraged, at least, which is insanity.
It seems like that should
at
be,
least for me, that's the number one thing I possess is critical thinking. I don't care who you are. I will criticize. I will do the research. I will not take it for granted. And that's the best skill I've ever developed. Yet it's not taught. It blows my mind.
I agree, but I have to just say personally, I've started using Grok, the AI.
X AI.
Yeah, the AI and X. Yep.
It's really good, right?
They have the deep search and the thinking, and I'm on that 12 times a day, challenging myself. Okay, is this right? Challenging this, that, and the other. And, in 4 minutes, it's given me a pretty good analysis and a starting point for me to dig in. And so it just makes it so much more easy to try to be objective and get the facts and all of this kind of stuff. So I'm like a big fan of Grok or the XAI, whatever it's called.
Yeah, for sure.
I started using it. I've been using AI for a long time, but I started using Grok last week.
I think that's the best one.
And not only that, it's not woke. Unlike ChatGPT, unlike Google Gemini, they're extremely woke. I'm always like criticizing the narrative and this, oh, sorry, we can't talk about this. This is political opinion. I can't talk about that. Grok is just gaslighting my comments. Like, not only is it not woke, but it helps me make it even less woke if it was. It's very good. I agree. As much as I'm very surprised how good Grok is, and this is not a sponsored episode by Grok. We're not getting paid to say this. We're not I'm just saying personally, I agree with you, Judy. It's great. So I wanted to thank you for taking the time. We're an hour in. I wanted to give you the opportunity to say something to the people that are out there, because people like Jason is basically saying this is one of the best episodes to date. I love this conversation. It should be a hashtag. I love this conversation, Jason, by the way, but that's okay. We'll forgive you. But all to say, did you have something you wanted to say to the people listening?
Okay. My main message is I don't have an agenda, a political agenda. I think that should be clear from this. I'm trying to get people to open their minds and to think more broadly about the issue, both the science and the potential solution space. And, if you're interested in all this, I'll, make another plug for my book, Climate Uncertainty and Risk, or you can follow me on Twitter at CurryJA. So I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Just before you go, Judith, obviously thank you for your time. I just wanted to say, when I was doing research, the paper we talked about earlier, 2005, and you had discussed it earlier, where you got criticism on it and you didn't dismiss it. You engaged with them, and it seems like, you gave credit where it's due. And to me, that seems like the way that scientists should be. So I just wanted to sort of, give you some props on that, because I think, that's what we need to get back to, that kind of science. We just want to get it right.
Exactly.
That comment is for you. He swears a lot like I do, but this is a compliment from Jason saying that
this is a great. She's good at it.
No, be honest. That's not what he wrote. If this is a grift, she's gifted as fuck.
Well, that's what I mean. I think he's saying
but
she's very effective at
there's levels to this. There's levels to this. Yeah. Very effective, gifted as fuck. Like there's
wow. Okay. Wow.
High praise.
Yes.
From Jason.
High praise from Jason. Again, Judy, great talking to you again. I hope we'll have you on again. I'm going to try to get James Anson to join us and maybe start that debate between. Yeah. We'll find all the things you disagree with, and we'll make sure to engage you, both of you on them. So thank you again. If you don't mind staying, I'm just going to remove you from the studio, but I'm going to make sure that your part of the video has been uploading, and as soon as it is, I'll just kick you out. But I'm trying to stay. Last time I did it to somebody else, but I didn't tell them before, so it looked pretty bad. I'm just kicking them out, but I'm just letting you know that that's the case. But thank you again for your time, Judy.
Okay,
thanks so much, Judy, for being here. This was an excellent conversation. I really got a lot from it.
We'll have you again. If you're down, we'll definitely have you again for a debate. Like I said, I'm working on this.
I'm always game.
Thank you again, Judy.
Thank you.
Great
There you have
chat.
it.
Wow.
Yeah, Jason seems to really have enjoyed it too. So this is, I knew her, and it's not because she's still in the back that she can hear us that I'm saying this, but I had a great time speaking to her on my podcast with her, and it was just refreshing to see someone that does not sound like a climate change denier.
No,
Like she said at the beginning, she's not politically right. She's more of a classical liberal. So technically, she'd be more like a leftist than a rightist. But by today's standards, she's pretty much a libertarian. So it was great to see her give her stance on this. But to me, it's just common sense what she's talking about.
100%. And I think just to go back to this comment by Jason, I mean, he's funny, kind of cracking a joke. He said, if this is a grift, she's gifted as fuck. What he's talking about is she came across as somebody with a lot of integrity who very clearly is not political. You may agree or disagree, and I think she would welcome that, and that's valid. But like to just besmirch her, to use the term, they kicked her out of or ran her out of academia. It isn't right, and that's the kind of thing we really need to get away from. Like we can't stifle. And when I say we, I mean us on the left.
Yeah.
We can't stifle. Yeah, we can't stifle dissenting opinions because you can clearly tell from that interview, she doesn't have a narrative. She's just, the data she's doing is telling her a different story from the narrative. And I want scientists to feel free to get to speak out about that when that's the case.
One of the things that she said that really stuck to me is that she quit her job when she didn't have to. She had tenure. So if you don't know what tenure is, that means she can stay there for as long as she wants and get paid. So they couldn't fire her, but yet not only did she choose to leave because that's not who she is, she needs to be working, because she would have literally collected a really nice paycheck by doing nothing. But the other thing I really liked that she said is that she also quit academia not to hurt her students, which I very doubt that a guy like Michael Mann would actually have the respect to do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is what I find very interesting. I'd love, Michael Mann, if you ever listen to this, join us. I would invite you on this show to talk about this. But I would love to know, would you do the same thing? Would you quit your career right now as the main poster boy for climate change if it meant that you're hurting your students or the people that are studying to be climatologists? Because at the end of the day, if what you're spewing is activism, that means you are hurting those people by not allowing them to have critical thinking. I doubt that he would, but that's a challenge to you. If you listen to this, love to have you on to debate, to actually speak about this, because that to me is integrity right there, to say that I will quit a tenure position that makes really good money and say, you know what, I'm tired of I don't want to hurt my students. I don't want that to be hurting them because my name is going to be on the work that they've done. I'd rather do less money on the private sector. That's, to me,
integrity.
It's hard to argue. Like her or not, agree with her or not, can you really debate that?
Well, and it shows like the value of integrity, right? Like just by showing integrity on one issue, you make your argument stronger on every other issue, because we're all human beings. We all have character traits, personality traits, and generally, if someone shows integrity in one area of life, they're going to show it in another. And again, you may disagree or agree with her opinions or the where she falls on this in this debate. But I don't think you can disagree with her integrity. I mean, she clearly believes in what she's saying. And Michael Mann's funny. I've actually I'm familiar with him a little bit. I'll probably dig into him a little more. But when it comes to integrity, I'm a little skeptical of any academic who has a PR team. Why do you have a publicist? Why do you have a PR team if you're an academic? Let's try to get him on the show. He might be harder to get than the other guy, but Hansen. But I'd love to have him on the show too, or both of them together. Imagine.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would love. I reached out to Mann in the past, so we can try it again, see what happens. But At the same time, I'm more curious to know what you guys out there thought of this. Like for the people that have been listening, obviously it's pretty clear about Jason, what he's thinking. But for all the people out there, what do you think about Judith? If you were on the left, did she make sense to you? Did she give you enough to make you want to put that critical thinking hat on and say, man, maybe she has a point? Maybe there is something more than just the science is settled.
The
So that's
science
the question.
is settled.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's the question I have for you guys.
That's a good
What do you
question.
think? Do you think that, you know what? Two-part question. Do you think, did she make you rethink your position on climate change? And the second question, would you want to see more debates like with a woman like Judith Curry and a guy like Michael Mann? Would you like us to set up those debates where we could play the moderator, ask questions on both sides? We have a leftist, we have a guy that's more conservative, so we do have two moderators that are not biased towards both of the people. So is that something you'd like to see? Question for you guys out there. And I'll ask you the first part of the question to you. Did she give you enough to make you think that the science is not settled? Maybe.
Yeah, and I think I would say she did that very well and successfully. And I think, again, I don't want to sort of put words in her mouth, but judging by what she just, that whole interview, I suspect she's not necessarily trying to change minds here or aggressively change minds. I think what she's trying to do is to open minds, to get people to understand that the science is not necessarily settled. And I mean, that, I think there's huge value in that, because regardless of where you stand on it, again, we're all just trying to get it right, or at least most of us are just trying to get it right. And there are some that are just pure activists that are, religious zealots who believe in the religion of climate change, as a, she used the term Malthusian, essentially people who just, believe human beings are a scourge on the planet. And I think we can safely ignore those people because they've clearly got an axe to grind. They're just nihilists. But the rest of us, the 90% of us, I think are mostly trying to get it right. And we are all susceptible to bias and tribalism and tribal thinking. And we all want to be we don't want to be outsiders in our own crowd. And that's an uncomfortable place to be, but that is essentially what this podcast is all about. We are, the one thing that unites us is this idea that we are political orphans. And did you reject the narratives, look at them, apply your own common sense, your own critical thinking. I like that you brought that up there, and agree with your side when they're right, but disagree with them when they're wrong. And I think that's the key takeaway here. If we can do that, if we can spread that mindset, I think we'll all be in a much healthier place as a society and a culture.
Couldn't agree with you more. And that goes back to what Jason is saying. His comments is on the screen right now. America supported Fauci, who had a reason to lie, royalties for life. And that is why I call her brave.
Yeah.
What is her game? What is her gain here?
Monetarily,
she lost.
She took a pay cut, right? Yeah. So she didn't. It isn't that. And I think that's what Jason's saying. I think he's saying, why would we blindly support Fauci, who had reason to lie, when we are happily, giving people like Judith Curry the boot when they're clearly not making any financial benefits.
And I want to mention this for YouTube and TikTok purposes. Jason doesn't know what he's talking about. He's like the retarded kid that always seems to show up on the show.
He's the retarded brother, little brother here.
Yeah, he's the retarded little brother that we like to have on. But at the end of the day, he is not. Fauci is the greatest man ever.
Yes.
And obviously he had nothing to gain. All he wanted to do is to protect life.
His integrity.
I just want to make sure
should never be questioned.
Never, because he got a pardon for it, not because he wanted it, just in case Trump went after him.
I mean, and I think his integrity is clear in that, RFK put out the book that made all those lies about him that clearly hurt his reputation. And he was the bigger man, right? He never went after defamation. Yeah. So just clearly, of course, I am being sarcastic. The fact that he didn't go after him for defamation is slightly, I think, tells us maybe tells us a little something about where the integrity lies on this issue.
So Jason, science should never be settled. That's pretty much what her comment was.
Yep.
How many times at the expenses of the people have they been so sure yet so wrong? And how many times was the money behind it? Every single time.
Well, yeah.
And
sorry,
hold on. Jason's calling us a bunch of rookies for saying the word retard. We're taking it back, bro. Taking it back.
It's just such a, there's no other word that fills that specific niche. I mean, I think me and you would both agree you would never use that word for someone with actual disabilities. But, if you're to use it in the way that we use it, like there's nothing else that takes its place. I'm glad to see it make a comeback.
I was watching a video the other day of South Park, and they were in court debating the word fag. He's like, you can call your buddy a fag, has nothing to do with its sexual orientation. Has nothing to do with the fact that you're gay.
Yeah,
you can be gay and not be a fag. And Cartman is just going through examples upon example upon example. And then the judge is like, fuck, that actually makes sense. So, yeah. Sometimes as much as South Park has gone down the drain, if you ask me, they went woke for a long time.
Yeah.
They weren't like objective anymore. Like they weren't hitting hard on the left over the past 4 years, right?
Yeah.
They were hitting very hard on the right, but not the left.
Yeah.
Now
they've gotten back to
one
that,
thing. Again, it shows how people are scared to get canceled. Because that was the perfect example. Because at this point,
if South Park is scared, you know what I mean? Like these are the guys that base their whole show on being extremely offensive. So if they're go down the woke route, it does show you how sort of much hold this whole worldview has on society. Would you say they've kind of come back a little bit though? I at least my understanding of it is, or my take is that they are, this was a funny clip or the show about where Randy Macho Man Savage identified as a woman, and then he
crushes everybody.
He's on the podium, like absolutely a dude in every, just beating the shit out of these women left and right. I thought that was funny.
I don't think, I don't think they've come back because I found the video. You know what? Screw this shit. If we're going to get in trouble, we'll get in trouble for showing this video altogether. Screw this noise. This is the video I was talking about. And this is why I love the word retarded so much, because again, it doesn't need to say that somebody is mentally retarded. Just your friends being slow. You're like, bro, stop being retarded.
Yeah, don't be
retarded. Because at the beginning, until it got all woked, retarded just meant that somebody had a learning disability, somebody was slow. It didn't mean you were talking like this all the time, right? So here's the video I was talking about, fag moment. Like this is fucking hilarious. I didn't think we'd be showing this.
Yeah, but went down the rabbit hole, but whatever. Let's go for it.
Are you seeing this?
That word just keeps changing its meaning. What's it got to do with us? We are really trying to understand this. How is it that you boys think referring to gay people as fags in today's world is acceptable?
Because we're not referring to gay people. You can be gay and not be a fag. Yeah, a lot of fags aren't gay.
I happen to be gay, boys. Do you think I'm a fag?
Do you ride a big loud Harley and go up and down the streets ruining everyone's nice time?
No.
Then you're not a fag.
So what if a guy is gay and rides a Harley?
Then he's a gay fag. I mean, is this really this hard? I don't know. All right, look, you're driving in your car, okay? And you're waiting to make a left at a traffic signal. The light turns yellow, should be your turn to go, but the traffic coming at you just keeps coming. And even when the light turns red, a guy in a BMW runs the red light so you can't make your left turn. What goes through your mind?
Fag.
Right. But you're not thinking, oh, he's a homosexual. You're thinking, oh, he's an inconsiderate douchebag like a Harley rider.
This is making insanely good sense to me.
All right, how about this? What would you call a straight man who doesn't own a Harley but likes them and might buy one someday?
You call him bike curious.
Bike
curious. Don't you people keep up with today's lingo at all?
That's too funny.
But that was from 2009, so I don't think they came back. That's a
Oh.
very old video.
I
That was
wonder if they do that
posted
today.
in 2009. The same thing happened with Family Guy. Unfortunately, they kind of went woke and they don't criticize the woke anymore. Like
Yeah.
they're very in between. But this is funny because I think this ties up with a question I wanted to ask you because we have about 40 minutes left and we definitely need to talk about this because
Oh, there's some big
this was
stuff
a big,
for sure.
we need to talk about that Zelensky stuff because, man, it is just going absolutely ridiculous. So as we were recording our podcast on Friday, I always look at my feed on X, right?
Yeah.
And I was seeing it. I was like, oh, son of a bitch, this is going to be fucking ugly. And the sound was off, but you could tell
You can tell by the body
the
language.
way they're, oh, Jesus. Yep. And I was curious I posted about this a lot, even like I posted 2-3 times about this already. But what do you think? What do you think about what happened on Friday? Is JD Vance / Trump wrong? Is Zelensky wrong? Should there have been a bit more diplomatic, or should have it been worse? Because if it was me, I got to tell you, I think I wouldn't have punched him. Because he's too small. He's too much like a kid. I would have. Trump was sitting kind of like this, right? He was sitting next to him. I would have backslapped him like a bitch. Like I would have just smacked him like on the backhand, as they did before duels back in France.
Yeah.
Like they would smack him with a white glove. That's what I would have done. Now we're gonna go out. We're gonna step outside and we're gonna take care of this shit. So what did you think when you saw that?
I thought like, oh man, I thought like I'm even gonna take it out of the arena of like who is right and who is wrong, because this is geopolitics, right? This is global politics. This is the great game. There is no right and wrong. As an observer on the outside, yes, of course, is right and wrong. But in that moment, for these people, there is only those with the power and those without it. And Zelensky came in with absolutely no leverage, and he is just an absolute idiot for behaving that way. Yeah, I get it's annoying. I get, Trump's personality. He demands you kiss the ring and all that. At the end of the day, you don't have any other option. You kiss the fucking ring. To call JD Vance a bitch, did you see that? He called him a bitch in Ukraine.
Under his breath, like a bitch. He called him a bitch like a bitch, not in a language that JD Vance.
Yeah, yeah, no shit, eh?
Like he called somebody a bitch by being a bitch himself. And to me, he looks. Have you seen the video of him dancing? Because he's an actor and a comedian by trade, right?
All the videos, the Beyonce song,
him dancing in like Indian gear, him on stage dancing. Like people don't know that this guy is not an army guy. Like he's not a tough guy. He's a little bitch that used to dance for a living, and now he's acting tough. He's an actor. Now he's playing the tough guy in his. Have you ever seen any of his videos or any of his pictures where he's in the military? All of his gear's brand new. It's like it's almost has crests in it because it was just removed from the wrapper.
Just from the wrapper minutes earlier.
It's just a political op. Like that guy is just driving politics. And you know what JD Vance told him, and this is unfortunate that it's not being spoke about more in the media, but JD Vance gave him shit saying, bro, you were here in September. He didn't say September. He said during the political campaign. I just know it was in September. In September, he was in fucking Pennsylvania parading for the Kamala Harris campaign, like saying how they were awesome for giving him money.
Not smart, man.
He went to see. That's what started it all. Because JD Vance is like, hey, bitch, I haven't forgotten what you did, motherfucker. You were actually campaigning for Kamala Harris in Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken. I'll Google it to make sure. But if I'm not mistaken, it was Pennsylvania, and he was parading in an arms production place. They were actually manufacturing weapons, and he signed a few of them with Democrats candidate.
Oh man, not smart. Jason, yes, we will definitely revisit this on Wednesday. I definitely could tell you've got some input here, but it's just too big. We have to talk about it today. I mean, fuck, man. You're in that position. You're the president of a country at war. You need to understand power dynamics. Do you remember the movie The Godfather, the very beginning scene when the guy comes in and I think his daughter was raped by these guys and he wanted justice. And the Godfather says, you come in here, you don't give me respect. Like you go to the Godfather, you need to kiss the ring. That's just how power works. Now, it may be, personally distasteful to you, but this is bigger than you, man. This is your entire country. You're at a war with a much superior adversary. It's essentially a stalemate. You cannot win it. And Trump has essentially given you somewhat of a, we talked about on the show the other day, 50%. He didn't want to sign the mineral rights, right? He didn't want to sign the mineral rights because it's 50%. Oh my God. No, man. You can't be seen as overtly political either because you don't know who's going to win the election. So don't go out and start signing things or campaigning for Kamala Harris, because if she doesn't win, what's going to happen is what is happening right now. And
he met with Shapiro Casey at a Scranton ammunition factory in Pennsylvania. And it's like, look at this. It's like pictures upon pictures.
And Scranton, Pennsylvania, that's where Joe Biden is famously from. So of course that's a political act in and of itself.
But he's denying it. When JD Vance told him that, he's like, no, fuck you. Fuck you. Like, stop lying. At least take it on the chin like a man. You fucked up. You thought that the Democrats would win because obviously that would have been a lot better for you. Now you're going to get anally raped by Trump.
And this is a good point, Jason. I think a lot of people didn't watch the full video. I remember when this show ended, I had seen the clip that's going around in Twitter, which is just the blow up. And I remember thinking, nobody looks good here. But when you watch that whole video, it didn't have to be that way. Trump, he came in with an attitude. I don't know what his plan was, but you had no leverage whatsoever. There was nothing you can do. You need to read the room a little bit. Essentially, this deal with the minerals is the best you're ever going to get. And as we talked about Wednesday, sure, it sucks. But at the end of the day, you don't have the money to develop that infrastructure, those resources. 50% of $1 trillion or $5 trillion or whatever it is a lot better than 100% of nothing. So just all of it was stupid on Zelensky's part from day one. And you get the sense that he knew it pretty much immediately. And then, of course, they put out statements saying, but we're still willing to sign the mineral deal. So essentially, you gain nothing. You're still going to have to.
You know why he said that, though? But you saw what happened in London this weekend, right?
That's the other part of this. And you go ahead.
But this is the part that, again, I made a post this morning where I looked at everything. I looked at Friday. I looked at what happened afterwards, because he went, I think it's on Fox News, where he was interviewed by Fox, and the Fox guy asked him, do you want to apologize? And he didn't want to apologize. Then he ran back to Europe and started asking more money from European countries. Like, he was, if I'm not mistaken, he was asking above $100 billion to say that that's what he needs to do this and do that. And then they actually organized a summit in London where pretty much everybody from NATO was there outside of the US. And then we even had our fucking our fag politician, Justin Trudeau, hugged him like, oh, brother, I feel you. I'm surprised they didn't cry with each other. Like, they didn't cry on each other's shoulders, but they're literally embracing him like was the victim. No, but they're playing it like he was a victim. But you know what they told him, right? They're like, you know what? We want to continue backing you up, and we want to help you put a peace plan together, but we can't do it without the US.
Exactly.
No shit. NATO is supported 80% by the US. If Trump, you know how badass it would be for Trump to simply say, you know what, guys? Peace out. Go suck a dick. 80% of your funding is gone, NATO. Suck a dick. We're gone. You know how good that deal, that mineral deal would become if you did that? Because as part of the full video, and that's the part that mainstream media is not showing, Trump said it in his face after they both exchanged where it got really heated. He's like, at the end of the day, I don't need to go further than this because you're not holding any cards. You have nothing, and we need to resolve this diplomatically. He said it. It's just that people don't show that because they don't want to show that Trump actually had common sense there. But after they argued, he's basically saying we can drop it right here because diplomatically, this is how it needs to be resolved. Because he holds no card. There's nothing.
None at
that
all.
what can
No
he do?
card.
Can you imagine if the US says, you know what, fuck your mineral deal? Not only are you not getting any more money from us, we're going to back out of NATO. So NATO pretty much dies tomorrow. And then 3, you're not getting the mineral deal. So no more funding, no more NATO, no more mineral deal. That dude is going to get ass raped. Magic,
maybe even literally, because
no, he would
win that
he
war.
would.
It ain't going to be good for Zelensky personally either. He's not going to ride off. He's not going to have a nice retirement, at the expense of taxpayers.
Did you see the meme? Did you see the meme about that on Friday? That's
no, what was
funny.
it?
It's like Vladimir Putin is calling China. He's like, "Hey, bro, did you see that?" And then the premier, the premier of China is like, "Hold on, I got another line. It's North Korea." He's like, "Bro, they're all together." You didn't see that meme?
No, I didn't see that one. Try to find it. But yeah, he Zelensky. I think that's the other side of this story, and I think it's a separate part of it, but it's very important too, because he went and he got the celebrity treatment over in Europe. And first of all, if you're Zelensky, if you're trading U.S. support for Canadian and European support, that's a bad deal, man. They don't have an ounce of what America can give you. But what it almost feels like is you can see this, especially if they continue to go down this road and continue supporting Zelensky sort of as a, in for spite in Donald Trump's face, you are seeing almost this fracturing of the Western sort of coalition. And we talked about this morning, a lot of people, especially if you're older, you might be familiar with the term the free world, right? The president of the United States is the leader of the free world. That free world is disintegrating now. It has been an alliance of Western countries based on shared values. And that seems to be disintegrating. And what that's really interesting for is us here in Canada, because we're going to come up to a fork in the road, and we need to think very carefully about which direction we go. I think there's going to be a lot of people who think we should align more with Europe if this divide gets broader, because, maybe they think we're more ideologically suited for that. But I think that's a huge mistake. We are, you can't geographically, we're America's, we're America's hat, we're right up top. But if America starts to feel like we're, not with them, but against them, that's going to be really bad for us. At the same time, if America feels this rift within the Western alliance, they're actually going to be quite eager for us to be on their corner, to be an ally. And that gives us leverage. We can start to ask for things like maybe favorable trade terms, get rid of tariffs, drop the 51st state talk. Unless if Canada wants that, that's a different story. Let us have that debate. I don't want America sort of saber rattling below us, because it's pretty scary when you've got the world's, the greatest superpower that's ever existed on Earth starting to talk like they starting to view us as maybe not as friendly as we're used to. I think that
there's the meme I was telling you, bro. Like, if you look,
what is he
bro,
say?
you seeing
this?
Bro, you seeing this? Vladimir Putin's there. Hold on, got a line, and it's North Korea. Like, bro, this is.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. But the thing is what sucks about what you're saying? Because I agree with what you're saying. Like, at least Canada under Trudeau, and even under Mark Carney, even under Pierre Poilievre, or most, they're still. Did you see they all posted, "We stand with Ukraine"? It didn't matter who it was. Even Poilievre actually fucking posted that shit over the weekend, even if it wasn't on Friday. So no matter where you look, our politicians outside of a Maxime Bernier, I have not seen one of them say that we need to stop playing this game. Like, can common sense people look at this and say, we've been using Ukraine as a to literally fund a proxy war against
Oh,
Russia.
absolutely.
But
I mean,
see,
are they
but
denying that?
nobody's talking about that in Canada.
Yeah.
That's not a subject of conversation. And
It's
you know,
also a testing ground for the weapons of tomorrow, and that's also scary. Have you seen some of the videos of like drone warfare? It looks like it's scenes right out of Black Mirror. Like there's some scary shit going on there, and they're
you
perfecting
want
these
to
weapons.
you want to be scared by this? I'm going to put my hat, even though it's not conspiracy theories, but in my old job as a sales engineer for a one of the largest telecommunication companies in North America,
Yep.
one of the things I was privy to is I could go to events where that was behind closed doors and they would talk about technology. That must be at least 5-6 years ago. At
So
least five, six
that'd be
years
an
ago.
interesting conversation. I'd love to be a
If
fly
it
on the wall in there.
if it's not more. But the guy was giving us a presentation on drone technology that could be equipped with mini bomb that were designed on DNA. So
Ooh,
basically,
ooh.
if
Assassination
they
drone?
got oh yes, so if they
Wow.
got your DNA, they could configure the smart bombs on that drone to your DNA that can be tracked. So they identify you, boop, send, it attacks you. They're mini bombs. They don't destroy, they don't have to level they don't have to level a massive amount of buildings, not like a square block, for example. But those are
Exactly, right?
bro, those are technologies that they were talking about that was developed and working 5, 6, if not 10 years ago.
Wow. And so just and you know how military technology goes. Like if we're hearing about it now, they probably developed it 20 years ago. The stuff that's
Yep.
being developed right now, we don't even know about.
Do you know there was fuck, that's a video. I should find it again, but it's an old video. It's probably at the early 2000, if not the 90s, but
Okay.
there was a guy following one of the VPs for Lockheed Martin. You know who Lockheed Martin is, right?
Yeah.
So one of the biggest
One of the
arms
big
dealers in the
industrial
world, like they're
complex
oh,
companies. Yeah.
oh yeah,
Cornerstone of the
and
military industrial complex.
100%. And the guy's following him with a camcorder. That's how old school the video was. But the guy asks the VP was about to step on his private plane. He's like, "Hey, what do you think about ET? What do you think about extraterrestrial?" The guy turns around, starts laughing. He's like, "I don't know about aliens, but if they need a ride, we can bring them back home." Starts laughing, goes in a jet, and leave.
Sort of talking about where our technology is.
I'm privy to have spoken to people that will not speak in front of the camera. So again, I should put my hat on.
Yeah.
But one of my old instructor in martial art actually worked on technology that was taken from alien crashed ships. And this is something that the guy never talked about this with me. I've known this guy for almost 20 years. He never talked about this. And then last year, because I'm talking about a lot of what we're talking about right now, he sees one of my videos / episode. He's like, texted me on Messenger when my Facebook was still working. And he's like, "Hey, bro, you and I should talk. I have some stuff." He's like, "I don't talk about this to people because I don't want, like, this is not what I want to do," but he's an engineer by trade. So he's like, "I've worked on some technology that would blow your mind. They don't explain to you how it works. They really silo everything, right? You're going to work on the engine portion, but
And you
we're
can
not gonna
tell that it's
it's
theoretically
just
not from Earth. I
it's
can't you
just you
can't just
listen to a guy like that, and this is a guy I've known for about 20 years. I have a lot of respect for. It's just that because I talk about what I talk about, he felt the need to approach me, just as in I'd never talk about this on camera. Just we're having a call on Messenger, and I'm just like,
I mean
fuck,
you can't
the
just
fuck.
dismiss that right away, right?
And he's
Like
a very level-headed guy. It's like, imagine that you like somebody like Judith Curry. You know her for 20 years. She has access to information that we'll never have access to. And then she just tells you in front of while you're having a drink and a cigar, you know,
by the way. Yeah.
by the way, and I'm not saying she said that. I'm just saying this is the level of thing, right? By the way, just so you know, we've been controlling weather around the world for 20 years, and everything that you've seen up to now has been planned and That's all part of the narrative. That we're
Just
selling you the
completely
narrative of
upends the
climate
narrative.
change, but really what's going on behind the scene is that DARPA has had that technology for decades, and we're the one fucking with climate. I'm not saying that she said that. Don't get me wrong. I'm looking at the camera. I'm looking at you right now. I did not say that she said that. I'm just saying this is the caliber of explanation. You know her for years. She's a professional in her field. She has access to shit that we don't know about. And then she's just like, yeah. So, to go back to where but
Sorry, go ahead.
this is a rabbit hole that we don't need to get into. But just to go back to where we're talking about, it sounds to me that it's almost as bad as that, because now, I don't know if you've been on social media a lot over the weekend, but now it's fracturing down the middle. Like you see that in Canada, you see that in the US, you see that in Europe. Like this morning, I was posting about this on LinkedIn. And man, even LinkedIn is post after post after post of people. I stand with Zelensky. I stand with Ukraine. I stand with this. So it kind of pushed me into making a video this morning saying, hey guys, for all the people that say that they stand for Ukraine, I got good news for you. Did you know that the Ukrainian military accepts foreigners? So you can now put your mouth where your balls are and go fight for democracy. Like, they will accept you. So if you do stand for Ukraine, you know what? You're welcome to go fight. They'll take you.
I saw this really funny tweet, and it was a guy, and he was basically saying, like, if we need to support Ukraine, because if Russia wins, that'll be the start of authoritarianism in Europe. He's like, imagine it. People will be going to jail for tweets. People will be going to jail for praying in their own homes. Just listing all these things that are going on right now in Europe. And that was the gist of it, is like, the authoritarianism, it's, the horror story, it's coming. The calls are coming from inside the house. The authoritarianism that you fear is already here, guys. There were people in the Ukraine and Germany who are being sentenced to multi-year sentences for saying disparaging things about immigration policy. And that's a fact. If you're so worried about creeping authoritarianism, it's already here, but it isn't Russia that's pushing it. Now, if Russia was in charge of Europe, could that be an issue? Of course, but I don't see any evidence that that's what Russia wants to do. I just don't see it. Now, back to what we were talking about, specifically Zelensky and all this stuff going on. I thought, I think we need, in Canada here, we need to be very careful about it's one thing to support Ukraine. And I think if that's your opinion, that's fine. But like, we need to understand, like, you can't antagonize this president. It's about power. And like you said, what were they fund? NATO 80%? That made me think, it reminded me when you said that, of how much, I know it's very easy to dismiss a lot of, like, when Donald Trump, because he's maybe not the best messenger for it, when he says, oh, they've been taking advantage of us and we've been making bad deals and blah, blah, blah. But there's a more than a kernel of truth to what he's saying. There is, Europe and Canada have benefited enormously from the largesse of America. We haven't had to invest a lot of money in our military, and neither has Europe, because we know the big brother's there to defend us if anyone picks on us. But what happens then is we are able to invest a lot more money into other things that we might want to spend. And the fact of the matter is there's a case to be made that the free world, or the Western Alliance, has been taking advantage of America, and a lot of it, right? If you look at how much funding they do for all these major institutions, the UN, NATO, even the World Health Organization, whatever you feel about that, fact is America still primarily funds it. There's America is the backbone of this sort of liberal post-World War II world order that we live in, and most of us enjoy. And a lot of it is just completely, at the same time as America's funding all this, we love shitting on America. We love talking about how terrible they are, and they are people too. And if people, nobody likes getting shit on from the people you're doing nice things for. I think we need to rethink how we think about America and how we deal with America. Is there valid criticisms of American foreign policy? Absolutely there is. But there's also they're very benevolent in many ways, and I think that goes under the radar a lot. And I think eventually, if we keep doing that to America, they are going to start to get more belligerent. Nobody likes to be be doing these benevolent things throughout the entire world, and then just have everyone talk about how big of monsters they are. Like, I think we do need to have a rethink about how we just view and deal with America. And this is not anything to do with Trump. Trump is a symptom of what I'm talking about. Eventually, if you keep taking advantage of people, whether it's an individual person or an entire country, they're going to get sick of it. And you don't want them, because they are, they have all the leverage in the world. And for the most part, they have not wielded it, at least against their allies. And I think we got a little cocky and a little smug, and we thought we can continue to enjoy the benefits of their largesse while continuing to feel high and mighty and morally superior. And that's not a recipe for success in geopolitics in 2025.
I seem to be incorrect. It's not 80%. Like, I'm seeing numbers from 22% all the way up to 70%. So let me re-clarify what I said earlier. I'm not sure where I got the 80% of NATO is played by the US, but all the numbers I'm seeing right now seems to range from anywhere from 22% to 70%. So I don't know why this is not more clear.
It's got to be.
I just want,
okay.
But I just wanted to make sure that it is. I seem to be incorrect, so I'm going to correct myself. It seems that the numbers are anywhere from 22% to 71%. So I think that it used to be a lot higher, and it's been dropping and dropping and dropping over the years. This is what I'm just going to say, my bad. Seems like I was wrong.
Well, I mean,
at the same time, but hold on, I just wanted to make sure that I admitted that I was wrong. That one of the things that we need to be very, very, very careful about as Canadians, especially, is that we have been very fortunate to share the biggest border in the world with another country, and that other country being the US, because the US has helped us a lot over the years. And countries like Russia, which literally you can watch them from Alaska, will not invade us because the US is so fucking close. So we have to remember that China and Russia, by association, have been probably kept at a distance because the US is right here. So as much as we don't have the military to do anything, like, if the US didn't do shit, believe me, Canada is not, it's not stopping Russia or the Chinese to invade us. This is not a war that we can win. So we need to be very, very, we need to start using our heads to understand that we have a lot to lose from pissing off the US. We need to stop pumping our chests thinking that we are independent and we can survive without them, because that is a massive lie.
Not.
Even if economically we were self-reliant, militarily, we are not. We do not have the power to defend ourselves if somebody like Russia or China would decide to invade us. So, as much as I'm still very confused as to, if you gave me a choice tomorrow, do I want to be part of the US or not, as in Canada, I still don't have an answer for you. I don't know. I see the validity of both sides of the argument. But one thing I got to say is, we look at the way we're responding, and once again, last weekend was the perfect example. We had a prime minister in Justin Trudeau that decided to kiss the ring of the midget Ukrainian instead of kissing the ring of Trump, which Ukraine brings nothing to the equation.
Not
only do they not bring anything, they make it a lot fucking worse by us associating with them. We're basically spitting in the face of Trump. So I'm very curious to see what's going to happen tomorrow, because we're supposed to have new tariffs in place tomorrow, March 4th. So let's see what happens. But we had the perfect opportunity to just stay away from that. we didn't even need to say
You didn't have to
anything.
do a
We
thing, right? Yeah.
we could have just let it go. Like Justin Trudeau should have done what Justin Trudeau did and talked to the gays and the LGBTQ community out there and make them feel better about their lives and just shut the fuck up about the US. That's what he could have done. Leave it at that, and that would have been better. But now all the party leaders, include outside of Maxime Bernier, actually stood with the Ukraine. So not only are we supporting the Ukraine, we're spitting in the face of Trump, and the fact that it's Carney, Trudeau, or Polyev doesn't matter, because even Polyev got, I think it was on the weekend, Trump told him that Polyev, in an interview, said that Polyev was not a MAGA, so he's not a supporter of Trump. And he even mentioned it on one of his posts, like Polyev did. Yes, Mr. President, I'm not MAGA. So now you have a guy like Trump that's looking to the north, and he's like, okay, so you had all the opportunities to do nothing. That would have probably been enough. But you decided to kiss the ring of Ukrainian, the cock ring of Ukrainian. You decided even the no, but even the counterpart, like, doesn't matter who's elected. Trump is looking, and even if the conservatives are elected, he's like, it's a lose-lose solution. So they basically fucked us. Both the liberal and the conservative fucked us. They fucked us when it comes to the US. So do you think that now Trump is going to be encouraged to drop the tariffs?
Exactly,
Or to make
right?
it
Like,
easier
why are
on
we
us?
fucking around with Ukraine when we've got these things that actually hurt us in the real world? Like, yeah, it may make you feel nice, and it might get you kudos at the Davos or the WEF or the WEF meetings with your globalist buddies. Yeah, maybe you get to rub shoulders with some of these guys, but it doesn't help Canada at all. Like, Canada has no interest, no strategic interest in Ukraine. It just doesn't. And like you said, I think it's fine to if your opinion is that you want to support Ukraine. I think that's a valid position. But if you're the leader of Canada, you don't need to go out there and basically, after this giant display of sort of disrespect to the Oval Office, to go out there and to support him. And if you had to say we support Ukraine, it should have said something like, we still support Ukraine. However, we stand with our allies to our south.
Shut the fuck up. You could have just, there's sometimes it's smarter to just say nothing. That was the perfect opportunity to say nothing.
Well, and the thing is, it would have actually mattered with all the other leaders giving their undying to support Ukraine. If we just don't say anything, that would mean something, right?
And don't show up to London either.
Yeah,
just do what the US is doing on that one. Let's agree with the US. Let's not go to London. Let's not say anything. But the fact that you wouldn't have said anything would have spoke volumes.
Yeah, it seems like America is very quickly going to start getting into a mindset of you're either with us or against us. And whatever you feel about how correct or right that is, we cannot afford to be against the United States of America at this time, maybe and probably not ever. They're just too big, too powerful. There's no benefit to us other than maybe we get to feel good about, oh yeah, we're Canada, we're thumping our chest a little bit. There's a good question. There's a good point here by Jason. If you want to read that out.
Here's a question no one's asking. Is it possible to disagree with Ukraine at the same time, not be on the Russian side? Does this situation have to be binary? You know what, bro? Yeah. I'm right there with you. I'm not with Russia and I'm not with Ukraine. I'm with Canada. I'm with the US. Like, I really, man, I've said this, I said the same thing about the conflict that's going on in Palestine and Israel. I really don't give a fuck. At the end of the day, let's stop supporting them. Let's stop sending them our money and take care of our own. I really don't give a fuck. Same thing with what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in Russia. I do not give a flying fuck. What I fucking care about is that our fucking dumbass Trudeau has admitted on camera over the weekend that he has given $20 billion to the Ukraine over the past few years. And if you look at the numbers, the US have given around the equivalent of $175 billion. So between Canada and the US and North America, we've provided almost $200 billion.
Why is Canada getting Ukraine? $70 billion? We got our fucking
0.
Okay.
2-0.
Even still, our health what would that have done for our healthcare system? You know what I mean? What would that have done for the massive homelessness problem that we have across all cities? Like, I'm from the East Coast. You know, I live in Fredericton. I live in St. John, New Brunswick, a couple of years ago. These are small cities that really have never seen major homeless problems. And now you go downtown Fredericton and you see people sleeping on the streets. Like, what we could have used that 20 billion, bro. Like, there's things we can do for it here, and I don't understand what Canada's interest is in that. And if you want, even if your interest is, well, we want peace, okay, well then you don't support peace by arming a country. Let's support a peace process.
And you know what bothers me the most is I expected the Liberals to do that. They've been standing with the Ukraine from the beginning, so I didn't imagine Trudeau would change his tune. Neither would Carney. But you look at Pierre Poilievre, and he's still selling if carbon tax Carney wins, Canada loses. You're no better, bro. You're talking about a carbon tax that's 20% of a tax. That's going to increase in April, while you just admitted to giving 20 fucking billions to the other one, to Ukraine. Like, why not talk about that? Why not be different from the Liberals and say, you know what? No, we're done with the Ukraine. All the best of luck to you guys, but we have our big problems here that we need to address. 23% of Canadians are admitting that they're having problems paying their bills. And then you have those fucking guys, they're just like, oh, Canada first, let's support Ukraine. That's not fucking Canada first, asshole. It's not. It definitely isn't. And this is what bothers me, is like, no matter where you look, it seems that in Canada, we don't have, even our conservatives are not conservatives. They don't want to help. They claim to be, they rebranded as Canada First. How is agreeing to help Ukraine putting Canada first? It's not impacting my life at all. Is it yours? I don't see a fucking difference if the Ukraine goes back to being Russia or if it doesn't. At the end of the day, it does not change anything in my life. You know what changed something in my life? That you're pissing off the president of the country that we share the biggest fucking border with in the world, the most powerful fucking country in the world. You're spitting in his face by saying that you support Ukraine. So instead, all you had to do is shut the fuck up and not say anything. Because you look at Pierre Poilievre's comments now, they're ripping into him bad. Like, you go through comments and they're like, bro, what the fuck's the difference between you and the Liberals now? Because I thought you rebranded as Canada First, but I stand with the Ukraine. If you put Canada first, you would kiss the ring of the US, because they're the one that have a direct impact on us, not Ukrainian. Whatever the fuck happens over there has no impact on us whatsoever. You pissing off the president of the United States, bro,
that does.
It's gonna fuck you. It's gonna fuck me. It's gonna fuck every single fucking Canadian out there, no matter your political affiliation. So it's fucking time that our fucking politician, our leaders, wake the fuck up and start smelling the coffee, because we're gonna get anally raped without lube and with sand in it. Like, it's fucked. Like, it's not even funny. We're just so fucked. Again, you had the perfect opportunity to do something, didn't do it, and now he's gonna
did the opposite.
No matter
did the thing that actually hurts us, right? Because, like,
and you don't think that Trump is looking at this, that he's like, both the prime minister, the possible prime minister, are against me. Because, as you said earlier, it's gonna fastly become, are you with me or you're against me?
And I don't, you hit the nail on the head, right? You know what, regardless of how you feel personally about Ukraine-Russia war, it really doesn't affect us directly. You know what does affect us directly? The fucking 25% tariffs is going to be slapped on the country here in the next imminently. Like, this is a perfect, if you understand how Trump works, his mind works, he values loyalty, right? And he values support. Whether you agree with it or not, your duty is to Canada and Canadians. And it seems like this was such a missed opportunity. Imagine now if, instead of flying over to London and, you know, backslapping with Zelensky in a big fuck you to Trump's face, what if you gave him a call and said, hey, saw that thing in the Oval Office, how about this? What if we come out with, you know, strong support of you and vow to stay out of this issue, and you maybe give us another couple months on the tariffs, or even just get rid of them. Like that's leadership. It is, but they couldn't. Trudeau couldn't. He just couldn't help himself. He had to go fly over there to rub dicks with Zelensky. And I'm not even someone who feels super strongly. If I had to pick a side, which I don't really think I have to, but if I did, I'd say, yeah, go Ukraine or whatever. But what side I'm really on is Canada's side. And at the end of the day, I'm aware that war over there does not help. It really is not in our interest to be involved. So
do you see what's on the screen right now? Do you see this?
Here?
This is Pierre Poilievre on February 28th. So last week, as a leader of Canada's common sense conservative, I have always been clear. We stand with Ukraine in its defense against Vladimir Putin's illegal invasion. I also firmly believe that the future of Ukraine must be determined by the Ukrainian people. Conservative will always stand on the side of freedom and democracy. Yet, as we spoken before, Zelensky has not held elections in 5 years, has removed all of the political parties that opposed him, even the biggest media platform out there is run by the government. So he's basically acting like a dictator, and we're supporting him.
Yeah.
And then that was on the 28th. And then he goes on the same day, he says right here, Mr. President, it is true. I'm not MAGA. I'm for Canada first, always. Canada has always been America's best friend and ally, but we will never be the 51st state. So you're basically contradicting yourself, because how can you be, you know what? You don't want to be MAGA? That's fine. I'm not MAGA. I sit somewhere in the middle. I agree with some things and I disagree with some things, but I'm not MAGA. But how is that putting Canada first by saying that we stand with Ukraine and calling the invasion illegal? Why did you even have to put that in there? Even why now you're going to spit in the face of Russia? Like, are you fucking kidding me, bro? We don't have the power to piss off anybody on this planet.
Yeah, that's it. That's the crux of it. At the end of the day, we need to know our role a little bit. We are not a global power player. That just isn't us. We don't have the power to do it. And so to be, try to insert, our sort of put our 2 cents in everywhere all over the world, it doesn't even make any sense. The only reason we're able to do that is because the Americans have been, by and large, sort of just easygoing about it. They haven't really, they've allowed us to go out there and thump our chests a little bit. The fact of the matter is, so much of what we have here in Canada comes from American generosity, and we have to accept that. We have to understand, if they go one direction, no, we don't have to follow in lockstep, but we have to be aware. You have to show a certain amount of deference and respect to the fact that these guys are just the much more powerful neighbor. It's just a fact of life. And so we can feel good about thumping our chest, or we can try to get rid of the tariffs. We can try to do things that help Canada. And I don't like a lot of the direction that Canada's, leaders are going. We need to stop involving ourselves in things that do not affect us. And the only reason we even have the luxury of going around and opining on all these issues is because, America has, by and large, stayed out of it. They've allowed us to go more or less say our piece. But times are changing, right? Like there's a new sheriff in town, and you may like him or hate him, but that sheriff has way, way, way more power to affect Canada than Vladimir Zelensky does. So you need to choose wisely here.
Man, we'll finish it on that, because I'm just going to rant and repeat the same thing you said, just with more swear words in the middle. But you're absolutely right. And I'm going to write a post about this right now, because this, I don't think that the average Canadian is, I don't want to say smart. I don't want to insult Canadians, but I don't think the average Canadian is realizing the impact of us saying that both the liberal and the conservative parties saying that they support Ukraine. I don't think they understand what that actually means if you look at it from an American's perspective. I don't think they realize that as the retarded little brother of the US, that, as you said, they allowed us to pump our chests. But you know
Times
when
are
the brother
changing.
has enough and just fucking
Yep.
smacks you in the forehead and pushes you aside.
Yep. You need
And
to pay
now,
attention to it.
but you know what the next question becomes, and this is what really worries me in the grand scheme of things, is if we continue pushing that way, how long before the US just says, you know what, Canada, fuck you. We're not going to deal with you at all anymore. Not only that, how long before they start looking at us as an enemy? Not
That's
even just be,
interesting.
because the thing is, if you look at it from an American's perspective, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but if I was an American and I'm looking at Canada saying Canada doesn't like us, doesn't support us, doesn't back us anymore, okay, what should we do? Cut ties with them? And if we continue aligning ourselves with Europe or China, like we've been doing already, because Trudeau and the liberals are big fans of China, what happens then? Do we become enemies? Do they need to invade us to make sure that China doesn't put boots on the this is the thing. Like, I don't think that people understand the scale of this.
Yeah, it's
If
pretty
we
serious.
start spitting in the face of the US, where the fuck are we going to be in 4 years from now? Because we talked about this many times. It feels like that Trump's been in power for years. He's been in power for 6 fucking weeks.
Yeah.
How far is it going to take? How long is it going to take for him to say, Canada, fuck you, we're done, you're ours now? It's not, you're not joining us, we're invading you to protect ourselves from having Chinese or Russian boots on the ground right next to our border. Like,
And
is
just
that, it's not that
yeah,
that big of a,
it's pretty
it's not
scary.
that much of a far cry, right? When you
Mhm.
start looking at it and backing away, just
And especially when you look at our resources, right? Why do you want to give America, who is famous for, you know, desiring resources from all over the world, why do you want to give them any excuse to come up north and just say, yeah, it's ours now? And then the flip side to what you're saying, which is all true, that like, you know, a lot of Canadians, I don't think, are very aware of sort of the seriousness of what we're doing at the same time is like, you know, America can be scary if you're their enemy, but they can also be a really good friend if they see you as that, right? So there's leverage here. If America starts to see themselves as us against them or us against the world, there's a lot of leverage now for Canadian leaders to say, okay, we're going to align strongly with America, and here's our asks. You know, here's what we want. And America will probably give it to us because they do like that idea of a coalition. You remember even the Iraq War, they were going in one way or the other, but they pushed really hard to get, you know, the coalition of the willing. Americans do not like to see themselves as sort of warmongers or whatnot. You know, whether they are or not is very debatable, and there are certainly some valid arguments to be made that they are, but they don't like to see themselves that way. And if we can't, you know, there's a lot of leverage for our leaders to parlay support for America into benefits for Canada in a way that Europe will never be able to do for us. And if America sees us as, you know, aligning with someone else against them, then it gets pretty scary for us, because I guarantee you, Europe's not coming to our defense if
they can't.
if America wants to take it. So the best thing to do is to use this. Like I'm not saying America is going to say it's us against the world, but if they do, you know, they're going to reward people who say, yeah, I side with these guys. And whether you feel good about that or not, you have to do what's right for Canada. And it's undoubtedly is the line. If it goes that way where we have to choose, it's a no-brainer. It has to be closer alignment with America.
Bro, it's, you know, this conversation, I wasn't even thinking about that earlier. It's just that as we talk about it, you know, when you hear yourself say something and then you're like, hey, okay, hold
You're
on.
like, oh shit,
Because
yeah.
I did not put, I thought it was funny that we decided to kind of lean, like to continue on the same path and say, hey, we'll support Ukraine. But I didn't think about the fact that we were directly spitting in their faces.
And that's what's happening.
And not only that, but both parties, this is the problem, is
Yeah.
that now Trump, it doesn't matter to him who's getting elected, because let's be honest, as much as I align with Maxime Bernier, he's not getting elected unless, you know, hey, you know what? Maybe, you know what? Hey, fuck, maybe we should talk about that. Maybe that's the type of issue that
I
will
could
actually
see.
wake up some people and say, could he win? Don't know. But this is the type of issue. And it's funny because when I spoke to his party, and I'm not going to say who I was speaking to internally, but that's what they were talking about. On, I think it was in 2021, the last election, they got a bump in the percentage of vote because of big issue. And I can't remember what it was back then, but this could be.
Would it have been like the COVID, the lockdown thing?
Oh, thank you. Yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly it. That's exactly, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. That's exactly it. How the fuck did I forget? Bang, bang. I used to get punched in the face a lot. So
Yeah,
But,
all good.
but now we're looking at another event like that could push Canadians to say, because if I invite everybody that's listening to this, go check what people are saying to the Liberals, to Carney, to Justin Trudeau. Go see what they're saying to the Conservative Party and Pierre Poilievre, especially on his feed on X. And it's just like, Canadians are not happy about this. I think more and more Canadians are starting to see that, hey guys, this is not good for us. Like
you could almost imagine. Sorry, go ahead.
Kiss the ring, bitch.
Yeah.
It's time. If I think that Zelensky should have kissed the ring, it'd be very hypocritical of me to say that Canada doesn't need to kiss the ring, because we should shut the fuck up and kiss
it. We gotta kiss someone's ring, right? It's the only.
I'd rather a finger ring than a cock ring.
Are you gonna kiss Zelensky's ring, who can do nothing for us, or America's ring, who can help us quite a bit? So, I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. You just got to have a bit of, like, it's just real politic, right? It's practicality. It's not about how you feel. It's not about what feels good. It's just about your options. And we don't have very many good ones. We've got to kiss someone's ring. We just, the size of our country and our power demands it. I think this is, I suspect it's going to be the beginning of a split between America and Europe, and it might just last as long as Trump's presidency. But if JD Vance gets in, now it's going to go another 4 years and maybe 8 years, and now it starts to get baked in permanently. And that's where, I don't think Canada wants to be on the wrong side of that decision. To what you're saying about, like, it wouldn't even surprise me if there was a bit of a shift rightward all the way around. Like, maybe a lot of the Conservatives go Bernier, and maybe a lot of the Liberals go, Poilievre, and he starts to go more left, and maybe that's the new paradigm shift or something. I don't know where that leaves the Liberals, but it'll be interesting all the way around. I mean, it's exciting times. It's interesting times. It's potentially scary times, but
yeah, I wouldn't call it exciting. I'd call it
exciting, not even necessarily in a good way.
No, that's what I'm saying. It is not exciting as in, ooh, I'm looking forward to see what happens. No, I'm like,
it's like, oh, I'm scared to see what happens.
Yeah. Can we if it was a game, I'm like, hey, time out.
But leadership means that you see opportunities, and if there is a rift between America and Europe and the rest of the world, that's an opportunity for Canada, because they're gonna want our support, and they'll probably, because at the end of the day, the tariffs don't really mean anything to them. It's a way for Trump to throw his weight around. He wants to swing his dick around a little bit, but if we give him something in return, like, I don't know, unwavering support, or he would see it as loyalty, and Trump's a big on loyalty, right? So you fucking give it to him if that's what it requires to help Canada. I'm not saying give it like just blindly for nothing in return, but that gives us a bit of leverage in a place where we have absolutely no leverage.
Bro, let's kill it right there.
Yeah. We'll a little bit more,
because at this point we're just ranting. So
yeah. Well, I think
bro, hopefully you liked it with Judith.
I thought it was a great show.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. It was great having her back. Hey, by the way, before I forget, the guy, for everybody that's listening to this, we will have Dr. Andrew Kaufman on the podcast on Thursday. He's going to join us at 1:30 Eastern, so you'll get to hear us bitch and complain and rant and laugh at stuff for an hour and a half before we have him on the show. But it's going to be a long show.
Coming in at 1:30.
Coming in at 1:30. So, yeah, on Thursday, Andrew Kaufman, doctor, great dude. Spoke to him before. He's a conspiracy. He's going to be labeled by a lot of people as a conspiracy theorist. To me, he's just a cool dude. So yeah, we'll see. Fresh reminder for Thursday. Again, we appreciate every single one of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for spending your valuable time with us. Hopefully you liked it today, because we're going to do a lot more of those. And if you like the show, make sure to follow us at the Poly Orphans on both X and YouTube. If you want to hear more about Rob _ the builder at X on X. And if you want to see more of me, at Real Nico Lagan on every single social media platform. But go to X. It's the only place I can actually be uncensored. So
Yeah.
on that note, guys, thank you for
Thanks.
being here, and we shall
Absolutely.
see you tomorrow.